I just want to
No
go
worries.
live for your presentation. I'll let you know as soon as we are.
Okay.
Sorry about that, Patricia.
Sorry. And we're good to go. Thank you for your patience.
No problem. Good morning, everybody. I hope everyone's having a great day today. Just to start off, my name is Patrick Zapatka. I'm a transportation planner with the Connecticut Department of Transportation. I've been assigned or appointed to this Mystic Tourism Working Group. I'm super excited to be here and happy to help in any way possible. So I'm going to begin my presentation just to bring everyone else up to speed. This is a set level presentation that's been asked by Commissioner Boughton, our chair to one of our subcommittees. So today I'm going to talk about active and completed projects in the greater Mystic area. There are four main components to this presentation. We're going to discuss briefly highway and bridge projects, municipal projects and grants, planning studies, and public transportation initiatives. So we're going to talk about some infrastructure improvements. As of today and into the future for up to 10 years, we're looking to invest an estimated $1 billion in design and construction projects. We're estimating 22 projects within the Groton, New London, Stonington, North Stonington, and Waterford municipalities. Out of the 22 projects, they're highway and bridge projects. 17 of those projects are bridge culvert improvement projects. 2 of them are safety improvements on Interstate 95. One's a computerized traffic signal system replacement. One of those projects is going to be intersection improvement, Route 614 and Interstate 95 ramps. And the last one is an on-road bicycle improvement on Route 1 and Route 649. Just to clarify, these are only for design and construction projects. The next couple of slides, I'm just going to showcase some of the projects that are going out there. I do have a list of all of them, but I want to do like an honorable mention for some of the larger projects that we're going to be investing down in the greater Mystic area. For many of those that you probably know, the Gold Star Bridge is a huge project. It's one of our very important assets that we're going to look to improve. Total cost of this project is estimated at $790 million. There's multiple phases that are going on with this. Phase 1A is steel strengthening of the northbound bridge truss spans, and that'll be considered under Project 94-256. Phases 1B and 2 are steel strengthening of the northbound bridge approach spans, deck replacement, and substructure rehab. Another phase to the project is the Gold Star Memorial Bridge southbound strengthening, the steel strengthening of the southbound bridge. And then we also plan to do a Gold Star Memorial Bridge multi-use path, and that's construction of a shared use path on a southbound bridge along other pedestrian improvements. Some of the things I want to talk about the Gold Star Bridge is the reason why it's so important for the steel strengthening is it allow consistently our freight trucks, emergency use vehicles to get over the bridge safely. We're planning for the weights for today and into the future. So that's why there's such a need to rehab the Gold Star Bridge. Another large investment we're doing in the greater Mystic area is Project 58307. It's the I-95 southbound safety improvements. This project is approximately 11 and a half miles. It's going to start from interchange 89 to the Rhode Island state line, passing through the towns of Groton, Stonington, and North Stonington. Purpose of this project is to improve safety. I'm going to look to upgrade roadside protective measures, meet current design standards, including the MASH compliant guide rails, roadway illumination. The estimated cost of this project is $60 million. And on the other side of the highway, under Project 58340 on Interstate 95, we're doing northbound safety improvements. This also is 11 and a half mile section. It's from interchange 89 to the Rhode Island state line. It'll be passing through Groton, Stonington, and North Stonington. Just like the southbound, we're looking to upgrade roadside protective measures and to meet the current design standards, including new MASH compliant guide rails and roadway illumination. The estimated cost for this project is $46.7 million. It's in the process, and we're looking to have it completed in this fall of 2024. Another major project that we're looking to do is under Project 58-341. There's an intersection improvements on Route 614 and the Interstate 95 ramps. This project is located on Allen Street and Mystic Street in the vicinity of Interstate 95, Interchange 89, and the town of Groton. The purpose of this project is to improve safety and reduce queues by addressing geometric and operational deficiencies. Anticipated construction completion date is fall of 2028, and the total cost estimate is $6.5 million. Another project we thought we should highlight too of the different types of projects we're doing in the area is Project 58-344. It's the replacement of bridge number 4675. It's Palmer Cove in Groton. We do know this bridge exhibits structural deficiencies. The deck is in a poor condition, and the superstructure is also in poor condition. Construction completion date is estimated to be spring of 2026, and the total cost of this project is $8.5 million. So those are just some of the highlight of some of the larger projects that we're doing out of the 22 I described. I do have all those on file, and if there's something we want to discuss at a later date, I can bring all those projects up and present them to you at a later date if we choose. Now I'm going to turn the tables a little bit and kind of discuss some of the municipal projects we have in the greater Mystic area. Right now we have 15 in progress or completed projects in Groton, New London, and Stonington. We awarded an estimated $16.7 million. Out of those projects, we did road safety audits, community connectivity grant program, the local transportation capital improvement program, better known as LOTSIP, and then a state local bridge program. A road safety audit, or RSA, it's a formal safety assessment of an existing roadway segment for use by all modes of transportation, including motor vehicles, bicyclists, and pedestrians. This approach is a boots on the ground approach where the department can really get out there. We bring a team of engineers out there, and we look at any types of concerns that the municipality may have, and we also come up with recommendations. It's a state-funded program, and it's proven to be pretty successful since it was initiated in 2016. Since 2016, we've done 3 in the greater Mystic area, 1 in New London on Route 32, which is Mohegan Ave. Another one we completed is Route 27 and Interstate 95 frontage roads in Stonington. And we're in the progress of completing a US Route 1 on Masons Island Road. And I can't say that word, Wampausick Road. I might have misstated that, in Stonington. The Department of Transportation also has a really successful program known as Community Connectivity Grant Program. It's a competitive grant program developed by us to provide only construction funds only to municipalities for infrastructure improvements that improve safety and access for vulnerable roadway users. We've awarded $975,000 to New London, Groton, and Stonington. We have connectivity improvements at Governor Winthrop Boulevard, Water Street, and Ferry Street. It's finalizing its signals, sidewalks, and crosswalks, and we're finalizing that this fall of 2024. We also granted a trolley trail extension in Groton. That's in design. And then a sidewalk ramp upgrade project in Stonington. And then we also have a state-funded program called LOTSIP. And the purpose of LOTSIP is to provide state monies to urbanized area municipal governments instead of federal funds, otherwise available through the federal transportation legislation. We awarded Groton and New London an estimated $12 million to 5 projects: the Groton and Thames Street drainage, the Groton Paquanuk Road reconstruction, the New London Ocean Ave, and New London Jefferson Ave reconstruction. All four of those have been completed. But I thought it'd be worth mentioning of some of the investments we've made out there. Right now, currently designed, we have a New London Broad Street, William Street roundabout. So within the LOTSIP program, here's an example of the Jefferson Ave and Chester Street roundabout that's been completed. As you see on the screen, we took an area that had concerns and we built a beautiful roundabout. You could see that there's, it's pedestrian friendly. We have bump outs. We've reduced speeds and potential safety concerns by implementing this roundabout. It's a beautiful design. The next program, a state-funded program that municipalities are eligible, is the state local bridge program. Municipalities that have owned their own bridge that's not on a state route, that serves as a public roadway, 6 feet or more, has a clear span, and it's considered poor condition. The thing about this program is I believe that we can pay up into 50% or reimburse up to 50% for design and construction of a state local bridge, which is pretty cool. The program has since turned around, and we've been doing a really good job about ramping up this program because we know it's important to the municipalities. We've awarded $3.7 million to Groton and Stonington. We have bridge replacements in Groton, 2 bridge replacements in Groton, and 2 in Stonington. And another avenue that I thought was worth mentioning that's outside of the realm of just traditional design and construction projects, but are important to the greater Mystic area, are the planning studies. Right now, we're currently working on an Interstate 95 planning and environmental linkage, better known as the PEL. The project is located on 95 from Branford, exit 53, all the way to the Rhode Island state line. Purpose of this project is to increase regional mobility and safety along Interstate 95 from 53 to Rhode Island state line. Previous studies that were conducted by the Southeastern Council of Governments is the Southeastern Connecticut Regional Bike and Ped Plan, the Multi-Use Path Feasibility Study, the Regional Transportation Safety Plan, Southeastern Region, Connecticut, and then the Route 32 Corridor Study, which has been completed in 2023. So what else do we have going on in the greater Mystic area? I wanted to do some mention of some public transportation initiatives. I'm pretty sure everyone on the call is aware of these, but I'd still like to note and mention that under SEAT, or the Southeastern Area Transit, there's a new employee shuttle to electric boat. There's restoration of Sunday hours. They expanded hours of service, serving communities in Waterford, East Lyme, Norwich, Groton, and New London, pending driver availability. And there's a transition from flag to fixed stop service. Under microtransit, which I know we discussed a couple of meetings ago, with the New London Smart Ride service in New London, that's operated by SEAT. And then they have the HOP service in Groton, Stonington, Waterford, and Mystic, Noank. Additional public transportation initiatives I'd like to discuss. Amtrak, the New Haven to Providence Capacity Planning Study. We're doing a future service evaluation, and it's beginning this fall of 2024. I'd also like to mention for the Shoreline East activity, we're doing a comprehensive marketing campaign. There are 4 additional trains supported by $5 million from our legislature. The Restored Through Service to Stamford and Legislative Service Restoration Report. It's due January of 2025. The ECRTS, the Eastern Connecticut Rail and Transit Feasibility Study. We have completed that, and since then, I wanted to mention some of the strategies that came out of that report. Some of the short-term strategies for transit is the potential for a Norwich to New London improved bus service, local regional bus service improvements from Waterford, Groton to Stonington, major employer bus service expansion, and a new service between the U.S. Navy subbase and Electric Boat's Groton facilities. Some of the the rail strategies that came out of the Eastern Connecticut Rail Transit Feasibility Study. is enhanced passenger rail service on the New England, the NEC, with stations at New London, Groton West, Mystic Alternative, Stonington Borough, and Westerly. And long-term is investing, I think that's defined as, greater than 10 years. I'd also like to mention that the town of New London received a RAISE FTA grant. It had to be on a SIP tip. It is not, the DOT does not have administration, and we're not overseeing this project, but I thought it was worth mentioning that New London did receive this RAISE grant. It's a vision for this project to accommodate the growth and recent developments and investments made in the historic waterfront downtown district. They received $17 million, which is amazing. And some of the components to the downtown revitalization is a Water Street parking garage expansion, Water Street parking garage, transit hub, and cultural and tourism center. The department, there's a project 31069 for track electrification. We plan to install electric catenary over the platform track at New London Station to support future Shoreline East electric service. Also within that RAISE grant, there's a pedestrian bridge, public access pathway, and riverfront landing. And I think they want to make improvements to the high-speed ferry terminal. And having said all that, I know time is limited. I think we used to have only a half hour. So I just wanted to say thank you, and I can open up the floor for any questions that anyone may have.
Tricia, I'd like to lead that off. Can't see hands raised, but I'll start it off. Patrick, thank you for the presentation. When I look at the presentation, most of it is mobility related to the interstates and renovations of infrastructure. So the last piece that caught my attention were the parking garages and the private and public investments in those parking structures in New London. So perhaps at our next meeting, I'm not sure if you're the appropriate spokesperson, but to get a little more into the weeds on what was done, how it was done, what type of negotiations went on, that would be helpful. And whether that was state or federal money that was involved in those parking structures. That would be, I think, move us along on that side. And secondarily, when we talk about transit and pedestrian safety, et cetera, and improvements, one of the issues that we've talked about in most of our meetings has revolved around access to both parking and to transportation within the Stonington, Groton area with the greater Mystic Seaport. And the question there of what potential resources for whether it be parking structures or intermodal transportation, they would be more within the greater Mystic area, and does the DOT get involved at that micro level as well in terms of funding and support? Or would we need to look at that from both local resources and federal resources? So kind of giving us an idea of where we head with that would be helpful.
Okay. So I put back on the screen the FTA RAISE grant. The municipality applied for it, but I do believe the department on our end provided a support letter for that grant. So for the details on that, I can reach out to New London and see if I can get some additional information for you on that.
And the acronym FTA?
Federal Transit Administration.
So that came from the feds, basically.
Correct. Yes, sir.
Now, generically, are those independent, or do you usually partner with them on those types of grants?
So, I mean, we do have a grants unit. So I do think, depending on the type of improvement we want to make, we will partner, or we will actually put in for ourselves. I know Kate has her hand raised. I'm sure it probably has something to do with, Kate, do you have something to add on to the FTA grant?
Yeah, I can. I've been pretty integrated into this planning process. So, for example, the funding is made up of the U.S. RAISE grant, CTDOT does not have a financial bid in this. However, CTDECD is providing 1.5 million, and there is Commissioners Investment Fund or Bond Commission. There's a note for 6.5, which I think is in relationship to the pedestrian bridge. There was a Bond Commission note for that pedestrian bridge. And there's a process for putting in the grant. So because these need to be on the tip, the towns typically would contact the COG with specific information. And we forward that to the DOT to make sure that it's on the tip. Sometimes for example, a new parking structure would likely need to be go through the air quality analysis process, which does take time. So we would be notified by the town both prior to application and prior to the grant being awarded by the federal agency.
Perfect. So, if you've got a summary or background on that particular project, maybe we can, through Patricia, circulate it to the group. That would be helpful.
Sure.
Of those, this FTA grant.
And Mr. Chair, yes, we would support, depending on the type of project to move forward. If the municipality were to apply for a federal grant, the department can provide a support letter. And if the department goes after a grant, we would work with the municipality to get a support letter from them. So.
Excellent. I'm just figuring out when we reach an agreement on where we want to go, that we know the process and how to get there. So I'm anticipating that, and I don't want to sideline the group now. I want to go through the presentation. I'm anticipating at some point we want to get to a conclusion about what our goals and objectives are, and process is part of that to figure out, okay, what do we need to do going forward, and how do we get to whatever decisions we make. That's very helpful. That's it for me. Tricia, maybe you can moderate that because I'm not seeing any hands raised. So if you've got hands raised, Tricia, take it away.
Nope.
Okay. Perfect. So I think this is, to me, for our group, I would say this part gets into the weeds about where improvements get done at the local level in a very big way. I think on top, Patrick, obviously, we'll be looking at the safe streets, sidewalks, etc., revitalization, things that improve pedestrian safety, and to the extent that we figure out how to handle the narrow road beds, what we do with cycle safety as well in the greater Mystic area. But this part has caught my eye, so I'll be looking for further information for this FTA grant program and process. Patricia, what's up next on ours? I see. Yes. My co-chair has joined us. I want to welcome. I noticed that Harlan's having trouble logging on there.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, it's a little chaotic here. I guess I just have a macro question, Patrick. With the change of administration, is there anything that we need to be aware of to flag, to anticipate? I mean, these are monies that are already in hand. They have been allocated, I'm assuming.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So
the 22 projects I mentioned are fully allocated to be funded and designed and built. So I do know, like, as far as the future of grants with the new administration, I do not know, but I can find out for you. But I do know Connecticut does receive a lot of pots of money or federal funds. So depending on what those pots are, we still are planning on those coming to us. So we could use some of those monies for those type of roadway improvements. Such as, if you want to make a roadway improvement with sidewalks, right? So we can use like STPB, which is like formula funds, which is what the state typically receives. We have those pots available for those types of improvements.
In general, can you just on a broad base, have you done much in the way of parking structures across the state? And what's been the general way you look at those?
So I did some research on parking structures that I know of. I've only seen 2 of them. One of which was in Stamford, Connecticut, and maybe New Haven. Don't quote me on New Haven. I know definitely Stamford for sure. It was one of the most recent ones. I don't know all the stipulations that went along with that as far as the details go. I do know it was definitely tied to a transit hub, such as Metro North. So
Right.
that was a big factor on as far as that parking garage or structure goes.
Okay. We'll probably have to, I'd like to have side conversations just to understand the thinking and the restrictions that went on those projects also to see whether there's stuff we need to consider. But
I did also do some research, and from what I understand, as far as parking structures go, they can be built. I don't know about using federal money for them, but we can build, honestly, we can build any parking structure we want as long as we go through the appropriate permitting, I think through DEEP.
okay.
So that way, like if we were to find state monies for it, for example, we can build parking structures in a flood zone. There's just permitting and certifications that would have to work and go through for that. So just to be clear that we can do it.
Right. And your involvement would require some financial involvement from DOT as well. If we had a state grant, would we be able to use your resources as well?
I could do some research on that. Depending on the grant, for example, we might have some like oversight on. If it touches our property, for example, say it's on state rights of way, the encroachment permit would apply, so we'd have some oversight involved in that. But if it's on private property, it doesn't affect the state roadway or rights of way, then we would be hands off.
Okay, perfect.
But
in
like
in light of that, I also, if there are areas that within the greater Mystic area, if there is proximate areas that the DOT would consider or would look at favorably in terms of both for congestion, something close to 95, et cetera, if there are locations that are property owned by DOT, I'd be interested in knowing that.
okay.
That would
I don't have those, but I can do some research for you, Chair, and we'll get back to you at a later date for that.
perfect. That's good for me. So, Patricia, where are we on the agenda? What's up next after this?
We have a guest speaker today.
Okay. You want to call the guest speaker and we can move on?
We have Joanna Wozniak Brown from OPM. She is the Infrastructure Policy Development Coordinator. Can you hear us?
So I can hear you.
There you go.
Can you?
Welcome.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity to come and speak to you today. And my colleague Matt Dayton, who is in a warmer place on vacation at the moment, has kept me up to date on the progress of the working group. And so I'm really glad that I had a chance to come and speak to you today. A tough act to follow with Patrick, but thanks for including me. As Patricia said, I'm the Climate and Infrastructure Policy Coordinator at the Office of Policy and Management. This is a new position. It was only created a couple of years ago. I'm the first person in it, and I've just passed my 2-year anniversary. For those of you who don't know, many of you probably do, OPM is the governor's policy and budget department that oversees budget, legislation, and intergovernmental coordination. And I wanted to also express appreciation that the legislature incorporated and prioritized resilience while formulating this Mystic Tourism Working Group. All of our communities in Connecticut, but especially our coastal communities, are experiencing intensifying precipitation and temperature, which threatens infrastructure, public health, and economic development, which is why you prioritized it. The state of Connecticut has several efforts underway across our state agencies to address these threats, and I'm just going to mention just a couple now. In September, we hosted an inaugural Sustainability and Resiliency Week that highlights work being done by our state agencies and partners across the state. Patrick outlined a number of investments underway by DOT that are incorporating future conditions. DOT also has a sustainability and resiliency unit that is focused on this. DEEP recently closed a request for information on their microgrid and climate resiliency fund. Department of Public Health has Office of Climate Change and Health. The Insurance Department is looking into public-private incentive programs for resilience. The Connecticut Green Bank is developing a funding program for parcel level resilience, so focused on residential locations. We also have an interagency staff working group on resilience that's been running since Superstorm Sandy. Yukon Circa has been a critical partner in all of these in developing data, identifying vulnerabilities, and advancing projects into design across Connecticut. As you know, as you have a COG partner on this working group, they're critical partners because they conduct land use, economic development, transportation, and hazard mitigation plans that are at the heart of all these issues that you're hoping to accomplish. And many of these plans and the data that they develop and the public engagement process through each of these, it directly translate into state and federal grant applications that can incorporate resilience. I know that you've been discussing a couple of other federal and state funding sources, but there are a couple of other financing tools that might not have come up that are available to municipalities, including stormwater authorities and flood prevention, climate resilience, and erosion control boards. I think we need a better marketing term for that type of board. But I also understand that resilience improvement districts have been discussed among the working group. This was a reimagined resilience approach to tax incremental financing districts in the governor's resiliency bill last year. And we're glad that this has come up as a potential opportunity as it gets at that intersection of challenges. I did want to land on one last note. It is a federal grant opportunity that might be of interest to the working group, but it's called Protect, and it's a discretionary grant program. It's promoting resilient operations for transformative, efficient, and cost-saving transportation. It's open until February 2025. As we know, we're not sure how these grants will be rolling out, but it had already been allocated and authorized. So it's something worth at least reviewing and seeing if the opportunity is applicable. Naugatuck Valley led an application for all of the northern COGs, and they were successful in getting, I think it's about $1.5 million to examine all their culverts and stormwater structures across the northern tier of the state. So that's just a sort of a sprinkling of efforts that are underway. I understand that DOT is there's some specific questions, and they're working on a written response to go through some of those specific policy questions that you had sent to us. But I'd also be open to any questions or further conversations in or outside of this opportunity. Thank you.
So, Joanna, I'll start it off. Thank you very much for joining us today. Specifically for me as co-chair of Commerce, the issue, obviously, of sustainability, resiliency is very important. The short-term problem that seems to afflict the Mystic Groton area is both, it's essentially capacity constraints in relation to transport. And on those lines, we have to reach, I'm looking forward to the group coming with a list of priorities, but for me, it's how do we get people there? And I think Patrick was very good in explaining how we're going to remove bottlenecks, improve infrastructure on our interstate. I'm not sure that the local residents will be thrilled in and of themselves that there is more capacity to get people into the area, particularly on the higher seasonality days and events. So the other issue is basically on a strategic basis to figure out, once people get off the highway, what do we do with them, particularly being the tourists? And there are three categories we're trying to address in my mind. I think I read the 46-page traffic study, which was very informative but relatively inconclusive. And we have three groups of people we're trying to address. One are the residents, to relieve the burden placed on them by traffic and parking. Two are the tourists. Two are the workers who need access to good parking and transport. So we relieve some of the on-site parking at the locations. And three are the tourists, that they want to have a coherent idea of when they get there, where to go and where to park, and how they can get around the various events and activities within the greater Mystic area. And those are the types of things I'll be looking for help with, or those where my concerns are. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on that from OPM, or if that's outside the purview as we sit here.
I wish I could deliver a one-sentence answer for you, because that would probably make your job a lot easier. But I'm afraid that's a challenge. My only advice would be that this is probably not a one-year type of solution. That it's probably something that working in close partnership with the COG and the local planning agencies of putting together, and the state agencies who are making other investments to maintain or improve on infrastructure, of having probably some deep dives into the using geospatial technology, some public engagement opportunities to understand how that flow could improve. And I also would probably the COGs also serve as sort of a great regional conduit, because you can't probably achieve all of these within municipal boundaries. So I think looking regionally is probably beyond Groton and Stonington is probably going to be a key aspect to that.
Yeah, and just to follow up, so with an OPM, so you are the infrastructure guru now within OPM. Is there, outside of DECD in OPM, is anyone focused on regional economic development in terms of trying to knit the resources together at OPM?
At OPM, we have the Intergovernmental Planning group, which is led by the Undersecretary Martin Heft, and then the Office of Responsible Growth with Rebecca Auger. And so they are currently working on revisions to the state POCD, and they do a lot of outreach to municipalities. So they probably be the key partners to look to next.
Yeah, so possibly we should follow up with them as well. But I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for OPM? Andre?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Joanna, it's great to see you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your presentation. It's been a privilege to work with your office on a multitude of matters pertaining to coastal resilience, and obviously this district encompassing Groton, Mystic, and Stonington, really on the front lines of those rising sea levels. And just again, appreciate the work you're doing. A big part of our plan is to deliver a legislative agenda, so to speak, to the Commerce Committee. And as was mentioned, a big part of this committee's mandate is to look at the aspect of resilience. And I have no shortage of priorities that need to get funded in the district, relating to, living shorelines, for example, in Mystic, or in the case of Groton on the Mystic side of the river, literally raising the road by a couple feet, which would be a pretty significant fiscal and financial undertaking as well, but certainly would change the infrastructure, than what is currently there. So my question to you is, do you have any recommendations that perhaps this committee ought to be making as part of this, legislative request with respect to, for example, the resilience improvement districts that was floated? I know we've been looking at a mechanism to be able to fund a lot of these projects. So curious if you have any thoughts on that, or could speak to some of those proposals in the past.
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Representative. I think resilience improvement districts are a really great opportunity. I might be a little biased recognizing that, but there's so many other programs that are hyper-focused on one particular threat or impact. And we have there's been so much work done focused on flooding. And which is great, because that's such a huge and devastating impact to our communities. And there's been less so on heat, though, which is producing a significant public health concerns, in addition to impacting environmental justice communities disproportionately. And then there's been less focus on funding opportunities that approach things holistically. Our communities are not just dealing with water. They're dealing with transportation. They're dealing with tourism. They're dealing with their existing infrastructure that was set for levels that were for 100 years ago. And so resiliency improvement districts provide a locally led way, or regionally, if you wanted to have intermunicipal agreements, to address all of those at the same time. And so that's why I think that there's a sort of a sweet spot of using a resiliency improvement district versus existing ones. I think that might apply, though, to scale. So if you have one location or one particular aspect of your community that is only dealing with flooding, then you could go with the more tailored solution. But so it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish.
Thank you, Joanna. And one other question. This is an issue that I don't think either political party has a monopoly on. I think it's also an issue that is rarely talked about, and that's the issue of flood insurance or flood premium reduction agreements. And that's something that I think is top of mind to a lot of folks who are homeowners or business owners along our coastline, and certainly in my district on both sides of the river. I'm so curious if you have any thoughts on that, or that's something that our committee should, or task force should also be looking into.
Yes, I think there'll be a public announcement coming soon, but I'll give you a preview that Commissioner Mays has long been a leader in recognizing that this has been an issue across the country, and a lot of insurance providers are fleeing states that are experiencing these. Meanwhile, the impacts are going up, and so therefore cost recovery are going to need to go up. And so we're trying to get ahead of that. And Commissioner Mays has called together a mitigation advisory group. And I know we use the word mitigation in so many different ways, but for them, they mean threat mitigation and avoiding the impacts to our insurance rates. And so there's a working group of industry folks, state agency folks, and construction industry representatives. And so we're working together to try and figure out a public-private incentive program to do on-site resilience. And then also the Green Bank doing that the on-site resilience improvements onto home residential structures. I think that between the two of those, there's going to be sort of a key focus on directly on impacts to residents and their infrastructure.
Thank you again, Joanna. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Yes, Chair Meskers, I just wanted to take just a moment to augment what Joanna said. The group that she's referring to, I'm actually the co-chair of the Risk Mitigation Resiliency Advisory Council that Joanna's participant on. So Rep. Baumgardner, I'll be happy to speak with you offline or follow up with you to see how potentially that advisory council under the CID could augment what we're trying to do here with Mystic, and flood insurance is a big focus of ours, as well as some of our other perils that we're working closely with Joanna and OPM on. So again, I just want to take a moment to mention to you that I'd be glad to follow up off.
Yeah, I just want to caution us all in terms of that. When I'm not wearing my co-chair hat in commerce, I sit on insurance and real estate. So I want to make sure that that while the issue is a real issue, without a doubt, on infrastructure and coastal resiliency, I think both the insurance department and the insurance committee are probably working on that separately. So it's a lane, as commerce, I'm more than willing to comment on the concerns, but I think the purview is outside the scope that I'd be willing to consider in the short term. Any other questions or comments? Senator Hartley.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So Johanna, first of all, we are incredibly thankful for you to be in this position and having stood up this position. So as a start, the state is recognizing the importance of resiliency. And to your point about getting ahead of this, so do I understand that the department, OPM, and the executive view the establishment of resiliency districts, improvement districts, as being initiated on a local level, or is the state in the process or planning to do anything on a statewide basis?
Thank you for that. That's a really great question, Senator. so the state isn't identifying those locations because I think the general approach to those would making sure that it's locally led, gone through all of the locally or regionally led, gone through multiple public engagement opportunities, and sort of incorporates all of the aspects that the community would want to do, because it's going to be directly related to the tax incremental financing and then what they actually want to be paying for. So we didn't want to step into that realm. We wanted to create the opportunity for municipalities to do it through legislation. So that's the extent. But that being said, Yukon Circa has developed a long list of what's called resiliency opportunity areas that take into account high flood, high temperature, or even medium flood and temperature risks, incorporated that with other planning priorities such as transportation and housing, and then identified any other additional planning layers that might come into effect into that. And so those are places that have pulled all of those pieces together, sort of, and gone through public engagement processes. So there is a list that has been started, and is probably a great place to go.
So thank you for that. Because quite frankly, this is a subject that is a black hole, and but it's here now, and we're just starting to see this. And hey, by the way, did we ever expect that Connecticut would be having brush fires? I have them here in one of my adjacent towns in Southbury. You've had them also, in other parts of the state. We had a tragedy there as well. So with regard to that list and this working group that we are now engaged in, is this area identified?
I believe so. I believe Circa had identified the Mystic area as a resilience opportunity area.
And of those resilient opportunity areas, once again, because this is the entire state, but is there been any prioritization of them in terms of those that are in the greatest need, i.e. potentially the greatest peril?
Yeah, so there has been. So this is sort of, I think Jim O'Donnell and John Trzynski would probably give a much more detailed presentation on that. But they have gone sort of in batches based on the funding that they had received. And so Sandy dollars were based on Fairfield and New Haven counties. And they developed a climate change vulnerability index, which is a map that shows you all of these hot spots and high impact areas. And then they went through the planning exercise of identifying the resilience opportunity areas for there. And they worked with all of the municipalities and the COG leadership to prioritize them based on that region. So, and then they moved it to central and southeastern Connecticut, and identified the resilience opportunity areas for all of there. They expanded the climate change vulnerability index map to take care of the whole state. However, there hasn't been resiliency opportunity areas established for the northwest and northeast corners of the state yet, just due to the way that funding has worked out. So there are places that have been prioritized. They've mostly been prioritized on a regional basis, but it took into account not only the high impact and all the places that led those locations to be identified, but sort of municipal interest in taking it on, grant opportunities for them to follow up on. Yeah, there we go. I don't know, Danielle sharing the resilient opportunity area. So there's a fact sheet associated with each of these that sort of dives deep into why these are important. So there's a list, there's a prioritized list, and then there's still room to grow for the northwest and northeast corners.
So this is very instructive. So could I ask you, where does this particular geographic area stand on that list?
I don't know. I wouldn't be able to address that, but Circa can.
Yeah, so I think as a follow-on, Tricia, we should connect with them to find out where this is, because I think that's important in our ultimate reporting on this work. And then you mentioned the COGS. So I mean, clearly, this cannot be a one-off singular kind of approach. Are the COGS the natural entity that exists to head up these resilience improvement districts?
They could, yeah. It would depend on how many municipalities are involved. If it's one municipality or two municipalities, it might not get to the regional leadership level. But if it's multiple municipalities, perhaps it's the legislation is written last year that didn't get called, which maybe it will next year. But that could be a place to make. I think COGS were prioritized in there as a potential host for those.
But in your opinion, is it not most effective and productive to be working on a regional basis as opposed to a municipality or 2 municipalities or 3?
Yeah, I think that I think it usually is. Like I said, for Representative Bumgarner, if you're dealing with sort of a parking lot scale and all you need is a catch basin, which most of the coastal communities are going to need more than that, then that's okay. Hyperlocal, your public works department might be able to take care of that. But you're dealing with huge impacts like Mystic, Groton, and Stonington are, then yes, I would think regional is best approach.
Okay, that's great. And I look forward to understanding where this particular region is on that list. So Tricia, just let us know if you're having trouble wading through that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Kate, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on that we have been doing some resilience work. I know that Emily Biggle has put in a application for funding for several towns to look at improving tree canopy for heat islands specifically. We've also looked at different protect grant opportunities, among them looking at Whitford Brook. The challenge, I think, that we've seen, we put in a Safe Streets for All grant a couple of years ago that was region-wide and had projects in 10 different towns, and it was not awarded. If you want to do something regionally, it really has to focus on one mode. So if West Cog was successful in doing that because they had a program that just did signals. So they did signals in 10 different towns, but it was the same project it was very comparable. I think it becomes less prioritized by the federal government when the project types are different in different towns where it's more individual, which can be a challenge. But we are looking at different resilience things, including looking at our drainage systems as well.
Patrick has his hand raised.
Go ahead, Patrick.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to pipe in for the Department of Transportation. We do have a sustainability and resiliency unit. And right now we're currently in the development process of a resilience improvement plan with asset vulnerability assessment. The purpose is to develop a set of priority projects using a risk-based evaluation of transportation assets that are vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. The RIP, or Resilience Improvement Plan, will make DOT more eligible for reduced cost share on potential proposed projects. So we're in the process of developing that. Joanna, you said a lot of this already, but I just wanted to reiterate the department is working on that. So stay tuned. And I also don't have a date on completion date or when that's going to go live, but I know we're in the process of developing that.
Patrick, notwithstanding this study, I'm assuming that every permitted project right now that gets undertaken encompasses a question about both sustainability, permitting with deep, or addressing issues of potential climate change and or flooding.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we are looking into that. Every project. They consider that and a multitude of other environmental factors that could be, variables within that type of project.
I just think as we talk about coastal resiliency and sustainability, and they're essential, and the issues about heat islands and remediation of many of these things, both an overarching plan and the necessity of interim infrastructure investments are going to require that those meet those standards and then ultimately are incorporated in the grand plan, because we won't sit here and wait for the overall study for a year or 2 or 3 years and not make the investments that the state deems essential. but we'll look to deal with all of those sustainable issues to the extent possible as we incorporating those in those plans, I would think. I mean, that's I guess at some level a question for both you and Joanna. I assume when we're looking at things now, we're trying to make sure we're anticipating where we're going with our studies.
Yes, I know specifically for like design and construction projects, especially for receiving federal money, there has to be a life cycle cost that's associated with that. So if we do redo a bridge or a culvert, it should have a life cycle of I believe up until say 20 years. It was an old standard that may have changed, but I do know that we do look at life cycle costs when we do replacements, rehabs as such
So-
for our,
So building things that end up underwater in 10 years is not considered to be a good standard.
yeah, no, it's not. Or if there is a building or a structure, then it may be designed to be flooded. So that therefore, if we can't do everything,
You can build the structural integrity so it can withstand it, basically. Okay,
yes, sir.
thank you. Any other questions from the group?
If I may,
May?
I have requested a copy of the deck sent to me so I can put it in our reference docs. I've received a few requests for it. That's directly to Patrick.
Perfect,
Will do.
fantastic. Patricia, where are we next on our agenda?
Next on the agenda is discussion of some focus issues that you've highlighted from past meetings.
Okay. So, at some level, I want to apologize from some level of disengagement, as we commented last time with personal loss and being, and the campaign season. But I've spent a fairly large amount of time reading through the traffic study, which was a 46-pager. And I've looked at a couple of the recommendations, and I would like the group individually and jointly to come back with actionable recommendations. In general, I think we've sat here and highlighted, in terms of the transportation parking issues, we've highlighted the issues that I've said probably in the side conversation today to Patrick. We've got residents, we've got workforce, and we've got tourists. We have capacity constraints that are creating problems. Patrick is looking to magnify those capacity constraints by improving the flow off 95. So once they get here, we need to have an active plan on what we propose to do. The general conversations, and I am not steering or trying to be the decider on these issues. The active conversations have been metered parking, which I understand Stonington turned down in the last electoral cycle. So that doesn't look to be the proposal, that in and of itself did not look to be more than a proposal to improve flow and parking on the main streets where people were shopping or going to the restaurants. I think going forward, we need to think about the parking solutions and which group we're targeting. Is it for the residents? Is it for the workforce, or is it for the tourists? And along those lines, a couple of the subjects that were brought up were improvements to Shoreline East, a potential water taxi, a trolley system, right? If I look at the Shoreline East, while I'm a fan of trains, I'm not sure the cost-benefit analysis that I'm going to get hundreds of people on a train to reduce the congestion and parking problems in Mystic through improvements in the Shoreline East in the short term. Because I think when you make investments in rail, you have to build infrastructure and density for people to consider rail. That's my personal opinion. I will be open to corrections or observations. When we look at a water taxi, I think we end up with a higher level of seasonality than a shuttle. When we look at a shuttle, the question becomes from where? And that becomes a question of where we potentially have access to a site and access with back to Patrick or back to the feds on the potential for an easement or some type of financial structure where if the state is involved and the feds are involved, that the public benefit is there and assured in terms of for the life of the structure. I don't think we're building structures for private benefit, so we'll need to consider that. My own personal view, and I invite both criticism and commentary, is that the first thing is a structure to my mind, right? First thing is a structure, and the question is where and who, and the structure then gives rise to demand for both a shuttle and or potentially demand for a water taxi. But with, in the short term, it would seem to me that the answer is a parking structure. The other alternative that occurred, and I haven't spoken to any of you individually, but about the potential. I'm not aware, and I'll put Peter and I'll put the aquarium on the spot. I'm not aware of whether or not you have designated bus parking spots or designated shuttle spots that might be available in the short term before we deal with parking structures. And I'm not trying to mix things up. I think there's the question of resolving the transportation traffic problem, I think, takes precedence of building a better experience within Mystic for both the residents, for the workforce, and the tourists. But most importantly, I think we need focused list of priorities, focused list of proposals, and I would suggest that between some of the active players who are in this committee and the elected representatives, that we need to get a punch list of proposals and priorities so that we can work with a comprehensive short and long-term plan to how to roll things out. So without a buy-in, if you will, for those priorities, and without the municipality helping to lead that charge, I would think we have to apply to Patrick, we have to apply to Washington, we have to apply to Joanne. We have to get ourselves organized as to what the asks are in relation to this and see whether or not we can get a coherent response from the feds and from the state. And then the question becomes, this probably gives rise to that further consideration later on of some type of taxing authority, which I think is an onerous issue in terms of a taxing authority, because in my experience in municipalities and in state government, you want to be very targeted if you're thinking about any type of a supplemental tax. And I'm not proposing that in and of itself, but those things need to be particularly prescribed to make sure that the investments, the funds that are generated, are protected and invested in prescribed ways, and are not used to reduce the mill rate, supplant local funds for other non-targeted things. So I don't want to gum us up with that. That may end up having to be done out of bonding, revenue, and finance, right? If we think about things like that. I think for us, the resiliency issue is going to be an issue for the long-term planning. I think we need to look at what's been done so far between Patrick and Joanne on OPM, see what they can give us to Mystic. I think my co-chair mentioned that. And from this group, I'd like to know where we go through a priority list on the issue of congestion, on the issue of parking, and specifically if we're thinking it addresses whether it's the workforce, tourists, or residents. Those kinds of my thoughts. I'm trying to continue to have the broader conversations in the next couple of meetings, but we're going to need to come through by the end of December with a targeted list of suggestions, which then, this comes as a fruit of the working group has to go through our committee to get a screening, and then has to go to public hearings if we have actionable items. But I think we've made progress, but it's been kind of we've not wandered, but we've covered a broad array of topics. So I'm looking forward to that feedback. I don't know if there are any thoughts or comments on my comments. We could start there. Okay. I see my co-chair, Senator Hartley. Do you have any comments for us or thoughts at this point?
Uh, Thanks for your leadership and work, and to all of the committee members. Yeah, as you know, we're going in, January 8th, and then the calendars, start to play out. But I will note that this is such a broad topic that we could also find ourselves in a position where, from a committee standpoint, we get a draft report first, and then a more refined report, not very long after that, but so as to not sacrifice, the overall product and proposal. So, I just mentioned that from a time standpoint. Thank you.
Great. So, Peter, I see. Do you have any comments or questions? I know you.
Well, Chris Regan had his hand up first, so like Chris, he's probably going to say the same thing as me.
We'll let you go, Peter, first.
Well, Chris, you're going to say the same thing as me, probably. So, if we go for the parking solution, which we're discussing, there's just a few things. I think the residents, tours, and the workers are not mutually exclusive. There's a way of solving all the problems, moving the workers' cars out of the inner Mystic to the outer circle of Mystic will allow more tourists to be able to go in and make it easier for residents. So we need to think holistically on those things. I also want to really, and this is probably a bit of sacrilege really, but people can always walk. So there's always an opportunity to put a parking lot, a parking garage, and be able to people to walk into the town. Obviously not for the disability, but the issue we always have with a bus shuttle is you'll just hit the same amount of traffic as you hit with a car. So it doesn't always solve that unless you can find another route. And another route then brings me to the question of how we use junction 89 more effectively than we currently use it at the moment.
Okay. I'll defer to the traffic experts, but my thought being that if I can get 300 or 400 people parked somewhere, that's probably 200 less cars circling the area.
Absolutely. I definitely think there's a collective solution to this, and it's a number of things. I've expressed some of those ideas already, but I'll defer to Mr. Regan, who's no doubt chomping at the bit.
Thank you, Peter.
Take it away, Mr. Regan.
So I would agree with you, Chair Maskers, in regards to solving the issue with the parking structure. I think first on my list would be getting a structure downtown would be the first priority. That's walkable, that's able to get the workforce and the tourists to be able to walk to their destinations in downtown. That's not far from it. The last would be the residents in regards to it. Then the second thing would be to have a parking structure up at exit 90. But I don't think necessarily we have a parking issue other than when we have a major event up at exit 90 for the properties off the highway, because we have a lot of parking right off the highway on surface parking, not parking structure. But if we're able to do a parking structure, then we can make the properties become more green and more attractive, possible further expansions for commerce. But the other thing is walkability. I agree with Peter in regards to that. We don't connect well from exit 90 down to the seaport because wintertime, nobody's walking it because it's complete sheet of ice on the walkways because of the drainage. That's a major problem. But that's my 2 cents.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments on the issues?
Bill Middleton.
Mr. Middleton. Where did he? Bill, are you there?
Patrick?
Patrick, you got your hand raised?
Yes, sir. I hope I don't repeat myself. I lost audio for like 2 minutes. I just out of quick curiosity, I was looking at aerial maps, and has anyone considered talking to where there is existing parking lots to see if those private entities or the private owners would consider putting a parking structure there? So for example, like the Seaport, it looks like there's a big parking lot. We put 2 decks on top of that. It's just an idea.
Only for 3 years, Patrick.
Okay.
We've only been discussing it. So yes,
Okay.
we'd be more than happy to do that kind of work. But I think Chris is
fund-
right. It might not be the right place, and definitely downtown would be an interesting to put a.
So it looks like there's a parking lot downtown, and then, maybe that's not for tourists, but maybe that's for residents and workers. So then it could alleviate the on-street parking for the workers that live. I don't know. I know that the state doesn't really own property in downtown Mystic. A lot of it, I mean, besides the state routes, but that's typically, curb to curb. But I didn't know if the conversations were had about either the public parking lots or privately owned lots to see if those would be considerations for a parking structure or not.
Patrick, I won't, I'll let you go in 2 seconds, Ms. Fisher. Patrick, there is, be careful what you wish for. There is a 46-page traffic study which identifies most of those spaces, but wasn't necessarily conclusive. And I think the place you're referring to downtown is the Art Museum, if I'm not mistaken, which is already at capacity. But we'll turn it over at this moment to Susan Fisher.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I appreciate the question. And like Peter, I can respond to you all by saying that the question has been mooted and discussed now for, well, I've been here 5 years. So what the situation is with the property owned by Mystic Museum of Art is that the building and grounds were purchased 100 years ago by a bunch of artists. Why could they afford that? Because it was a slag heap. It is literally built on the slag heap that was caused by the trolley works next door, originally housed in what is now called the Powerhouse and the Randall Building. We co-own that lot with Steamboat Inn, which is one of the downtown Mystic property owners. And it's a 60-40 split in ownership. We are currently working on a plan. We're trying to fund a plan for the best redesign of that lot. Those of you who've known it and hated it know that it is spectacularly ill-designed. You also know that the surface is uneven and needs a lot of work. It is so expensive to do this work that we recognize the importance of doing it once, not twice, and doing it right. The issues that we face are multiple. Do you try to pack in the maximum number of parkers, or do you try to design around resiliency issues, which we've been hearing are multiple and interconnected? Mystic Museum of Art earlier this year worked with the town of Groton to submit a Long Island Sound Futures Fund proposal for a planning grant. This would be to accomplish, let me be clear, the planning, which would take probably a year to sort these issues out, get the consultation we need, seek advice, come up with a brilliant plan that will solve all the problems. We would then work in phases toward completion. Right now, we are waiting to hear, and it should be in November, whether that grant has been awarded. As a nonprofit, Mystic Museum of Art exists as a steward of important cultural heritage, but we obviously do not on our own have the capacity to affect the kind of improvements that the town would relish seeing and that our visitors would relish using. And I also am very aware that the present layout for the museum's purposes is not ideal. We are practically unrecognizable from the street. We would like to make the museum, we would like to deploy, in fact, the museum's ground, the only green space on our side of the Mystic River that is publicly accessible. I'd like to deploy that as a public amenity. A lot of people don't even know that's available. So where does the balance fall between creating an important destination, improving wayfinding, and increasing resilience on the one hand, and on the other hand, packing the maximum number of cars into a small space? A parking structure has been contemplated. The sheer cost of that and the impossibility of the museum alone or the museum in partnership with Steamboat in recuperating those costs eliminated it from our previous discussions. But as a public-private partnership, we would like to arrive at an ideal use of that space. Thank you for letting me have the time to say that. I've been listening with interest as these meetings progress and not knowing when the right time to interject this is, because on the one hand, the issue, someone used the term earlier in this meeting, seems hyper-local. We're talking about one parking lot, but we are talking about a parking lot that functions as a municipal lot, even though it is in fact privately owned by one nonprofit and one for-profit entity. You can imagine the complications just in our own discussions.
Susan, just given the current situation and the capital constraints, so I think we're talking about 40, potentially 30 or 40 more parking spaces at best if we, in some reconfiguration. Was that what I read in the report?
You can, according to the report that you read, which was written a couple of years ago.
Yep.
With the consultant hired by the town of Groton for the parking group study. Yes, there is a potential gain, maybe, of, we've recently had some closer scrutiny of it, about 20 spaces, which would not allow us to make the improvements, say, in canopy, in heat, in flood mitigation that we would like to consider. Although mitigating the pollutants from the runoff into the river is certainly feasible no matter what the design of the parking lot turns out to be. Is that a confusing enough answer?
No, it's actually, I'm hearing about 20, maybe less, depending on the amount of heat mitigation. So that, Patrick, was where I thought we were going to when you identified that spot, that we were going to be it's a laudable solution to a very localized problem, but doesn't address the overall offloading of people who then drive around looking for parking spaces.
What I would offer, I'm sorry if I'm speaking out of turn. What I would offer is that wayfinding and traffic in Mystic comes into several bottlenecks and actually several dead ends. The Mystic Museum of Art's lot could be, and I don't speak out of pure self-interest, although that is never entirely absent either, but we could be a great destination for a shuttle. Between the Seaport Museum and Mystic Museum of Art, you've got all the stops you need. You've got places where people can get off and be at their leisure and walk anywhere. So while we can't offer ultimate parking for everybody all the time, we can help increase we can help rationalize the flow of traffic through Mystic and across the downtown. And we can offer, at least if we reserve enough space for temporary parking, we can allow cars to drop people off, go park, and then those who are able can walk back to the destination, which I think responds to something Peter was discussing earlier.
Perfect, great. Thank you very much, Susan.
Sure.
Bill Middleton, are you back on?
I think I've overcome my technical difficulties. Can you hear me this time?
Yes.
Okay, great. I just wanted to sort of tie the last several comments together, starting with yours about, coming up with specific recommendations, moving people from exit 90 back and forth, and Susan's comment about the museum's parking lot. I was on the board of museum for some number of years and had a front row to the parking lot there. And I think the potential of a parking structure there is something we've talked about for decades, but it just comes down to cost and how that gets funded. But I think it would go obviously a very long way in terms of relieving things. And in terms of, so that's clearly a very specific request. And I think if you look at Route 27 on the east side, across the street from the river, if you will, I think there's a real opportunity to underground those power lines and maybe put a bike path there that might be, at grade, easier to maintain in the winter. And again, those are pretty specific asks and objectives. But I think, and then also redo those sidewalks on the west side, which clearly need some attention. I mean, they're just difficult to navigate as is.
Okay. I'd love to see those things back to us in form of writing, just to look at this. And at some point, I'm going to ask the group to figure out, and I have to figure out the process for the prioritization. I mean, Susan, you're muted.
I don't mean to interrupt. One thing I can provide to the group, if they're interested, is the deck of, we've had Kent and Frost landscape architects provide several iterations from maximum parking to maximum resilience and good environmental citizenship considerations. And I can provide those to the group. I would want to check with my board of directors. I don't think there's any reason why any of them would object, but those are specific possibilities that I could provide to the group if you're interested.
I certainly would be interested, Susan. I thought more particularly about the aquarium and the seaport from the point of view of that they're nonprofits. And I thought about you, and now I find your parking lot is a mixed use. So that's going to get to the, where funding is available, where structures are owned or leased or eased. I mean, the state putting money into a structure speaks towards having a controlling interest in the structure in some manner, shape, or form. Or even under the feds, we would want to make sure every time I've done a grant for a nonprofit, I'm looking for them to have, I guess, sustainability for 20 or 30 years with the grant going for the general benefit of the public. So that would be the same concern I'd have, whether it's even for a parking garage, for whatever benefit that I'm looking to encourage. So that's always a concern, but I would definitely appreciate that.
Kate Rattan.
Kate?
Within the discussion of a downtown parking facility, I'd just like to point out two findings of the ECRTS rail study. And the first being that the rail station that is already existing in Mystic has an insufficient amount of parking to also serve as a commuter rail station. That station is also built on a curve, which would really hamper the ability to provide a high-level platform in that location. But the Packer building lot is also too small for the Packer building. And maybe that's a potential location for a structure. The alternative Mystic station was cited within the document at Mason Island Road in a undeveloped lot. And so I'd just like to, throw those two into the ring for locations for a parking garage, as they would be complementary to future rail development and are also still proximal to downtown.
Yeah, I'll have to, I wasn't aware of the alternative site and haven't looked at it. I don't know what the capacity, what parking structure and if the property is already owned by the Connecticut DOT or if they're, okay. That'll be all part of that question cycle, right? Patricia, anything left on the agenda for today to discuss?
Possibility of date discussion for next meeting.
Yes. So we are on the 13th. The next date would be the day before Thanksgiving. I don't know that that is exceedingly viable. I might suggest an abbreviated meeting, say an hour, as we try to drill into some ideas of recommendations and conclusions, etc. I would maybe suggest, is the Tuesday acceptable, which is the 26th, I believe? Am I right, Patricia?
You are correct, and I am off that week, just a notice.
You didn't ask for my permission, Patricia.
I totally did.
Okay. So I stand corrected. But will someone be able to carry me through on the Zoom, do you think?
Absolutely. Yes.
So circulate a proposed date to the group. I want to get feedback for the Tuesday, the 22nd. And it's not because I want to make another lengthy meetings. I want to start going back on the summary conversations on the suggestions, which are back to parking, trolley, shuttle, water taxi, sustainability. I think as we talk about sustainability, it looks like a big issue that may require us to carry in or onto the following session, because the sustainability issues are such fairly significant infrastructure issues that I'm just hoping that what we do is sustainable, which I'm relying on DEEP and the Department of Transportation, the permitting functions, that we will do something sustainable if we're building a structure. And the rest of those issues should come through the selectman / town manager as partial request for infrastructure support for the tourism industry, I would think.
Chairman, just if you're talking about the 26th of November, it's also the Connecticut Tourism Coalition's board meeting. So a lot of us would be at that. That's at 10 o'clock. That's 10 o'clock till 12, so you can move the time around, but 10 o'clock till 12 is the Connecticut Tourism Coalition fall board meeting.
Okay. Does anyone object to the Monday off the top of their head? I want the bigger tourism people, yourself included, Sir Peter, on the meeting. So if we have to go Monday, I'm perfectly fine. So why don't we circulate a proposed date of Monday and ask everyone if they'll be able to attend or assist, and we'll do it at 10. And I will circulate the agenda. Again, we'll start drilling down on the issues. I'll see if we can get some questions and answers from Patrick. Patrick, a couple of things we asked you about the FTA, et cetera. We can start looking at potential resources for potential plans. I'd love to know as well, conceptually, you guys normally subsidize at some level, whether it's the railroads or buses that are connectivity between municipalities at some level. I mean, some of that goes on. This is kind of off the beaten path in terms of shuttles to parking for tourism. And is there a potential for any subsidies for traffic congestion, et cetera, relief for something like that, maybe to establish it? Is there a potential for either a grant or more permanent funding? So I'd love that, to see whether that can go. And I guess the question would be both to yourselves, and if you're aware of whether there were any federal potential subsidies aware for the same type of thing.
Got it.
Because that might get us somewhere in terms of solution as well in the short term. I mean, when I think about it now, I thought the parking structure was the short-term solution, and between permitting and resolution, I don't know how long we would have to get if we go there, and maybe some reserved shuttle spots and be working a shuttle out from one of the major attractions, being either the seaport or the aquarium, might be the opening gambit, but that's reliant on funding as well. Without further ado, I think unless there's any, Susan, thank you for clarifying on that on the museum. Kate, thank you for the commentary. Andre, thank you for reminding me that we did promise to consider resiliency. I will do my best. I think that's a big nut to chew on, so that's my only hesitation. Patrick, great for your contributions, and Peter, as always, I really appreciate your commentary and interest. Bill Middleton as well. I know I'm probably forgetting a couple of people. I want to thank you all for where we are today. We're somewhat further along, but again, I think all of you, I want to throw you back at my first commentary, which is that at someday I need something in my hands that's actionable for proposals that has a concurrence of the group. And I encourage you to have conversations both with Town Manager John Burt and with Daniel Cheeseborough, just so we can coordinate what would work into the wish list and/or request that comes back both to the state and the federal government. I think what was key, what I heard from OPM, there needs to be sponsorship at the municipal level to fill out the requests, or at the COG level to fill out requests to be able to secure funding for whatever endeavor we're looking to do. And I don't think we're there yet, but I'm hoping that's where we can drive this to. Okay, thank you very much. That concludes my lengthy comments, and I will see you all potentially on Monday, the whatever date it is, Patricia.
November 25th.
November 25th. Thank you. Take care, everyone. Thank you very much.